The table saw is used for rip cutting. On the miter saw, we saw that the operation like this is a cross cut. Now we'll be doing an operation where we cut the board long ways, and that's a rip cut. So the first thing we want to do on the table saw is identify the board to be flat on a face and an edge. On this case, we have a nice flat face, it doesn't rock back and forth, and we have a nice flat edge, it doesn't rock back and forth. Notice that this face is a little bit rougher than this face. So we want the good face down and the good edge against this part of the machine. This part of the machine here is called the fence. So some people call it a rip fence because we use it for a ripping operation. So we're going to be sending the board through this way and cutting the board with the blade. The blade right now is too low. We want to raise it up. We don't want to get too high with the board, but to raise up the blade, we're going to make sure the center wheel is loose. So we'll loosen that up. And then now with this crank, we're able to lift up the blade. So let's take a look at that. So we want it about that high above the work. That's about 1/4 of an inch or about the height of a pencil. So now we're ready to make a cut. So let's set this blade up for, let's say, a 2-inch rip cut. So if I can get the camera nice and tight here, what I'm looking at is a 2-inch rip cut. What a 2-inch rip cut looks like is when the blade is, the inside of the blade is 2 inches away from the fence. So that's my 2-inch mark, and that's the inside of the blade. So when those two are lined up, that would be a 2-inch cut. Let's keep it here for a second, and let's practice again for a 2.5-inch cut. So I'll slide the blade over, and then I want that 2.5-inch mark right there to line up with the inside of that blade. So let's go ahead and knock that fence over a little bit until we're lined up just like that. So now we're set up for a 2.5-inch cut, and we'll make that cut. So what I'll do is I'll make a cut, and I'll show you the way it looks, and then I'll slow it down and show you the mechanism behind how where I put my hands and things like that. So let me get the dust collectors on. So the switch here, I want to make sure that I pull the paddle out and push the paddle in. Notice I have a green blinking light. The machine won't turn on until I get a solid green light. So let's wait for that. Oh, doesn't like that. So let's try it one more time. Wait a few seconds. Okay, the reason we have that green light is because this saw will stop automatically once your finger is introduced to the blade, which you don't want to happen. So if you watch my finger hits the blade, and then real quick, if you look over on the switch again, I get a red light. So keep your camera right there, hit the blade again. So the saw is detecting my finger hitting the blade. If you accidentally hit your finger in the spinning blade, the saw will shut down, and hopefully it won't cause any damage to yourself. Do not try that. It's a safety feature that we're lucky to have, but again, don't try that. That's going to cost about $200 a fix every time someone's finger gets introduced to the blade. So let me go ahead and start my rip cut here. We'll do it a few times. So let me get the dust collectors off. Okay, so we made a rip cut right down the board there like that. So that cut has been done. Let me show you how I made the cut, the thought process of what was happening in my head as I was making that cut. Again, flat on a face, flat on the edge. If a board rocks back and forth, here we have an example of a board, again, that's not flat. We wouldn't want to use this on the table saw. So as I'm pushing my board through, I have tight pressure against the fence this way, and I have good pressure against the table this way. So I'm pushing through, I never let my hand get past, I think I have a line, let's see if it shows up on camera here, I'll make it bigger. right about there. I never let my hand get past that line. So I'm putting pressure, putting pressure, putting pressure, putting pressure. Right when the board is over the iron part of the table here, I grab my push stick, never letting go of the board, transfer to my push stick. Left hand comes over here, and I push, 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 push. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. And now I'm done. All the way through without the blade touching the board. Okay, so if I rewind that just a little bit, things that can go wrong. Push, 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 push. And then I say to myself, I need a push stick. And I let go of the board. If I let go of the board, the blade's still spinning. The blade can pinch the board against the fence and cause the board to fly back. And it goes about 70 miles an hour. And if you're standing in the wrong spot, it's gonna hit you. That's the reason I always say never let go of the board. So when you're transferring from your hand to your push stick, never let go. Always have your left hand holding the board down while you grab your push stick. Move your hand over here. Now you're able to push through the cut. Not done yet, not done yet, not done yet. Now you're done. So if you do that correctly, it should be nice and smooth and no problems. If there is a problem, you're standing to the left side of the blade. You're not standing in front of the board, because if it does kick back, it can hit you pretty hard. So you always want to stand to the left of the blade. That's why I have your left hand over here, so it kind of forces you to the left of the blade. And as you're pushing, 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 grab your push stick. Okay, it does kick back. It throws it back and it doesn't hit you. It hits the trash can behind you. Okay, so that's the safe way to using the table saw. Here's the dangerous way to doing it, which I never want to see you do. If you decide to cross cut on a table saw, this is what could happen. You push, push, push. Watch how unsteady this part of the board is. Can you see that thing wiggling back and forth? So you never want to do this, because if you do, the blade will push the board this way. You'll lose contact with the fence, and the board will get thrown across the shop in a very expedient manner. Over here, we have an example of what can happen if the board does get thrown across the shop. Someone let go of this board, and a big rainbow cut happened here. So that was caused from the board being thrown across, or grabbed by the blade, sucked into the blade, and then rainbow cut happened, and then it gets thrown across the shop. So you never cross cut with a fence on a table saw, always a rip cut. The last thing to talk about is this part of the table. This table is called the outfeed table. Its function is just to support the board as it's cut. If you work in a shop or a job site that doesn't have an outfeed table, somebody might ask you to tail off for them. If they ask you to tail off, that means you just support the board from underneath and you don't grab it or pull it. You let the operator do all the maneuvering of the board. So always have loose hair or loose jewelry and long hair tied back. And if you have any questions, come get me. Thanks. In addition to being flat on a face and an edge, the board has to be at least 12 inches long. So a board like this probably would be too short to cut. A board like this would be fine.